After the destruction of the Tartars in late 1202, Temujin had another enemy taken off of his list. However, Jamukha, the Naiman, and some of the Merkits were still conspiring against him, and his relations Altan, Quachar, and Dartai had just abandoned him to join up with Jamukha, and possibly his brother Khazar as well. But the sources are ambiguous over him and Temujin's relationship, although it is strongly hinted at that he left Temujin. There may have been another campaign in late 1202 after the destruction of the Tartars against the Naiman of Buyuk Khan, although the secret history inserts an earlier campaign after this event, the destruction of the Tartars, and it's possible they were confusing two separate campaigns, or just mixed up the chronology again. In the winter, Temujin and Toghrul decided to strengthen their alliance. Toghrul and Temujin's father Esugai had been blood brothers, and now the decision was made to formally adopt Temujin as Toghrul's son. This is interesting, as Toghrul had increasingly been showing himself more and more of late to be increasingly unreliable, not sharing loot from his campaigns against Americans, and just being overall a feeble and inconsistent person. So perhaps Temujin was trying to tie down an alliance he felt was getting away from him. So his next step then was a test. He asked for Toghrul's daughter Karabeki to marry Temujin's eldest son Juchi, and for Temujin's daughter Krojanbeki to marry Toghrul's son the Sangam or the Sangam's son Tusaka. It's not clear how Toghrul felt about this, but the sources are very consistent that the Sangam was furious at this. He was probably afraid that Temujin was trying to sneak in the inheritance of the Thirteenth Empire, as Toghrul by this point was probably in his 60s, and the vultures were circling as to who would take the kingdom after his death. As the Sangam was, it seems, a bit of a weak person himself, it didn't look good for him naturally inheriting his father's kingdom. The secret history of the Mongols has the Sangam get into contact with Jamukha, Altan, and Quachar, who then convinced Toghrul to betray Temujin. Rashid al-Din puts the blame more on Altan and Quachar, while Marco Polo relates an oral tradition that it was Toghrul himself who conspired against Temujin. Probably it was a combination of Toghrul was always easily swayed by other people's opinions, it seems, and likely had his own fears about Temujin's rising influence, and allowed himself to be convinced into betraying Temujin. So they invited Temujin to a celebratory feast, saying they accepted the proposal and told Temujin to come with only a few men. Very reliable. The secret history tells us that two herders, or possibly spies, Temujin had in the camp, named Badai and Kishluk, overheard the plans and ran to tell Temujin, who was still a day or two away from the camp. Rashid al-Din has the shaman Tebtengri, also known as Kokochu, a son of Munluk, a warrior of Esugai's, and now the husband of Temujin's mother Olun. He has him tell Temujin about the plan, and that's how Tebtengri comes into Temujin's service. But Tebtengri comes up more later, and we'll get into him then. Temujin was saved from walking into a trap and managed to raise a small force before the army of the Thirteenth rode up against him. Toghrul, Jamukha, and the Sangam were all in the army, but defeated Temujin. But Toghrul and Jamukha didn't seem to have the heart to go and finish him off. The Sangam was wounded in the face with an arrow, and Temujin's son Ogadai was almost killed, but luckily saved by his captain Borgu. Luckily, as Ogadai would eventually succeed Temujin, but spoilers, that comes later. Once again, things looked bad for old Temujin. At the Battle of Kalkaljid Sands, which was what that battle was we just talked about, the rug had been swept out from under him again. Everything was taken from him, and this time he looked beaten for good. His enemies, and even his most important ally, had all united against him and defeated him militarily, broken his army, and sent him scurrying off into the bush to hide, just as he had so many times before. Things looked bad for him, and he looked like he was about to disappear into the anonymity of history, as so many other steppe warriors had before. But we wouldn't be doing these videos if Temujin had disappeared like that.